Hello dear learners, I am back with the fourth lecture of my 12th module, and my fourth lecture will deal with Know as you grow, and I have tried to give more ideas about folklore here. So now we will start our fourth lecture. As an obedient student of the folklore discipline, I planned this course in a syllogistic fashion, which, when completed, will enhance your knowledge regarding folk literature, orthodox and heterodox customs, the changing scenario of folk culture, a detailed state by state study of oral tradition, folk music, folk dances, folk performances, and recreational activities, folk tradition of knowledge, rites, rituals, and its symbiotic relationship with tradition and heritage, the ever evolving interrelationship among myths, legends, and literature, folk crafts and materials, the various social, economic, and political factors leading to folk as a pluralistic identity, the challenges lying ahead in the conservation of folklore, including the scientific study of folklore as a field of study. This course is not a conclusion towards folklore, but an attempt to generate curiosity about folklore among students, the future citizens of this country when the world has become a global village. Now, I will give you a quick recap of what I have done till now. In module 1, I have discussed about the definitions, history of folklore. In module 2, 3, 4, 5 also, I have discussed about the oral poetry traditions, various performative traditions, folk music, folk theatre and so on. Then in the further modules, I have discussed about the cultural assimilation and also the interplay of gender and caste, and also how women play an important role in folklore. In module 8 and in module 9 and 10 also, I have discussed about the modern challenges faced by the folk culture and how it surpasses and includes them. And in this present module, I am discussing about the techniques to preserve folklore along with methodologies and ethnographical research and archiving folklore. So, I can say, this lecture is a kind of my conclusion to the course, and also I will be dealing with a few other aspects which you can use in your further research. So, for grasping further knowledge about a specific aspect of this broad field, one can study further on identity, dogma, indigeneity, dialect, marginalization, culinary art, wearable art, cultural appropriation, socio-economic structure of folk, folk knowledge transaction, cultural psychology of folk, digitization of folk culture, inter-community conflict and exchange, cultural anthropology, new theories of ethnography, folk culture for global sustainability and etc. So, I can say that this course will open up a doyen of perspectives for you, so that you can indulge yourself, or you can say involve yourself in ethnographical studies, anthropological and other dimensions of folklore. Now, I will be speaking about one certain theory which is very prominent in folk culture, that is subaltern theory. Folk studies and subaltern studies are related because they both focus on examining the histories, cultures and lives of underrepresented or understudied groups. Both disciplines provide alternate viewpoints that elevate voices that have historically been marginalized in the elite discourse and challenge prevailing narratives. So, the case of the subaltern and the folk people are more or less the same. What we say? The subaltern represents the marginalized people, means the low class people, and also there are other aspects of subaltern which I will be discussing. Similarly, folk also deals with, the rural part of India. This was our previous notion, though the notion has changed now. And now it also we have the notion that it deals with the low class or peasant class, but it's not so even. But yes, it is a representation of the marginalized. The cultural expressions, customs and knowledge systems, especially those transmitted orally such as folk tales, music, rituals and crafts are the main subject of folk studies. It honors the genuineness and inventiveness of regular people, frequently exploring how their daily experiences reveal a distinct perspective and resiliency. Both the disciplines, as I said, highlights how oppressed groups maintain identity, challenge hegemony and preserve history through oral and cultural means. Now, about the history of subaltern studies or subaltern theory. Antonio Gramsci coined the term subaltern, and it was propounded as studies by Ranajit Guha, one of he is called, the founder of the subaltern studies. Interestingly, Ranajit Guha published his work, his seminal work actually, on subalterns, and it just was the groundbreaking work the world needed. He gave a perspective on how historiography and also elite historiography along with bourgeois historiography, that is the history making and the history of the people, is dominated by the people of the upper class. But the subaltern theory says that the subaltern people should also have a voice. And he says that the subaltern people, for example, we can say that when the independence happened, right, the freedom fighters, we know a name of the prominent few, but not all. But he says that the mass, which was a major part of the freedom fighting for Indian independence, is always ignored or marginalized. Them he terms as, in the umbrella term, not all of them, but most of them, in subaltern. That is what Ranajit Guha says us about the subaltern theory, giving us the subaltern studies and memorizing us, or you can say he is making us familiar with the term subaltern and who the subaltern are. Subaltern academics criticize, as I said, how conventional historiography has obscured or misrepresented the perspectives. A group of South Asian academics after Ranajit Guha and his contemporaries were responding to both elitist nationalist history, which concentrated on upper caste and which depicted Indian history, as I said, during the freedom fighting of Indian independence as being influenced only by British acts. Such histories, they contended, failed to acknowledge the political awareness and also marking and not giving much importance to the subaltern. Who are the subaltern? The agencies of the women, tribal communities, peasants and other groups. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, the movement gathered momentum, incorporating ideas from cultural studies, literature and anthropology, in addition to history. The extension of subaltern studies to global and theoretical discussions, especially within post-colonial theory, was made possible in large part by academics such as Gayatri Spivak, Partho Chatterjee and Dipesh Chakravarti. In a very well-known essay, Can the Subaltern Speak?, Spivak questions if the subaltern could ever be heard in the prevailing epistemology, frameworks and criticized subaltern studies itself. The area expanded throughout time to encompass research on gender, caste, race and globalization. Despite the eventual dissolution of the original collective, subaltern studies continues to have an impact on academic and activist circles, changing the way that researchers view representation, history and power. So, Their shared interest, the subalterns and the folklore, in speech, agency and resistance is what connects them. And also, subaltern studies provide a theoretical framework for understanding the folk materials as forms of political expression and resistance as well as cultural artifacts. Now, I will be speaking about some of the folklorists who have been lost in oblivion. They had a great contribution in folklorist theories and studies, but we have gradually forgotten them. I have attached a photo of one of the prominent folklorists, that is Shobhana Sundari Mukhopadhyay. She belongs to the illustrious Tagore family. She belonged actually. And she was one of the first to compile and collect fairy tales. But yes, very few knows about her. The second one whom I am going to talk about is Ashutosh Bhattacharya. Professor Ashutosh Bhattacharya joined the Bengali department of University of Calcutta in 1955, and he was an excellent repository on folk literature. He gave us actually, okay, and he has a very illustrious career. He started, after his education in Dhaka University, and in 1939 his famous book History of Bangla Mongol Kabbu was published. And interestingly, Rabindranath Tagore himself sent greetings for him. After that, he worked as a research assistant to the famous anthropologist Verrier Elwin. And then his topic, Bengali folk literature, became so important that he wrote books on them. His books, Bangla Lok Sahitya, 1 to 6 volumes, 6 volumes actually, Bongio Lok Songit Ratnakar, Bangla Lok Sangskriti, Folklore of Bengal, and also the Sun and Serpent Lore of Bengal are some of the very important books in studying Bengali folk literature. Also, these not only gives a perspective on Bengali folk literature, but helps us to get an overview of how we can study folk literature in general. Remember, whatever theory we study, we need to apply it. So, if we are studying one prototype, for example, the Bengali folk literature, we can actually apply the elemental analysis in other folk literatures, be it the world or be it other parts of India, to understand the folk literature better. Also, he introduced the Chhau dance of Purulia to the world, and he has books on several on Chhau, and also in like Mark's dance of West Bengal and others. So, we can say that despite I have named only 2 of them, there are more from whole of India whose contribution we do not remember much, but I have just named 2 of them, and if we study them, we will actually get to know what are the roots of folkloristics and folklore studies, and maybe we can use their analysis and their, you can say, thought process, perspective to understand this whole area better. Next, I am going to talk about folk medicine. In contrast to professional medical education, folk medicine refers to the traditional healing methods, cures and beliefs that have been passed down through a culture centuries, frequently orally or through apprenticeship. Folk medicine, which has its roots in regional traditions, the environment and spirituality, is usually used by elders, shamans, herbalists and others, or community healers. Folk medicine, in contrast to contemporary biomedicine, frequently takes a holistic approach to health, considering illness as an imbalance of nature, social or spiritual forces rather than a medical element. Although folk medicine techniques greatly vary from countries, they all use indigenous knowledge, individualized care and incorporate rituals, prayers and beliefs about the body and the natural world. For instance, folk medicine in India encompasses a variety of systems such as herbal medicines, tribal healing techniques and Ayurvedic aspects. It exhibits a thorough comprehension of regional ecosystem and can provide insightful information about community-based care and medicinal plant. Folk medical knowledge, documentation and preservation have garnered more attention in recent years. So, we should remember that folk medicine is a diverse field and it has incorporated the sustainability and also the nature in it, which makes it important and also a part of our biodiversity. Despite being frequently disregarded by contemporary science, it remains an essential component of medicinal procedures worldwide. Now, I will talk about folk journalism. So, when the so-called media was not invented, the communication process was mainly carried out by adopting signals, sounds, signs, gestures, symbols, etc. And since ancient time, the importance of innumerable folk forms such as folk painting, music, rhymes, rituals, inscriptions, sculptures, dances, journeys, storytellings all have told us about the contemporary society in which they were composed. But with modern technology, we are able to know more about them. With the help of media, the folk society used to receive and give various news to the people of their respective groups. And what are the medias? The inscription, folk painting, music and everything. The journalistic aspect is associated with these descriptions. Some want to say it folk journalism. Remember, the term was coined very recently and it is said that communication is the main aspect of journalism. That connection is not possible unless it has objectivity and detachment. We may not find these features in folk journalism exactly, but probably everyone will admit that the description of rhymes, songs, folk dramas, pachali, storytelling can be considered very important by us to understand the various news of the folk society and the folk mentality. This journalism does not appear except for some special occasion or annual event. Basically, regional events dominate them. This dominance also has two aspects. There are some news that are some propaganda, okay, and also in broader sense we would say an advertisement. For example, when we talk about Jatra, the Bengali folk theatre, the very prominent Bengali folk theatre. Previously what happened when a Jatra was to be held in a certain village or in a certain area, people used to take mics or sometimes handmade mics actually and used to kind of announce that this Jatra will go on from this day to this day in this place throughout the village. What happens in recent times? In recent times, they do advertisement in newspapers. So, when the Jatra Palas are going to take place, okay, what the newspapers do and the producers of the Jatra Palas do, they kind of give big advertisements in the newspapers that this Jatra will go in these places in you can say a stipulated time and the date and everything, and also who are acting in it, the performers. Sometimes they have the star performers which attracts more audience, and the title of the Jatra Palas are extremely interesting, we can say very unique actually. So, previously there was the man-made you can say or the physical announcement, now it comes in the newspaper. This is advertisement and also a part of folk journalism. And another example of this I will give you is the folk drama Bhabai of Gujarat. The artists of Bhabai advertise the goods of local traders in order to perform their folk drama in a market or through acting and singing their plays. In return, they also get some money. However, such examples are not found everywhere. and this is called, promotional news. And even folk journalism has taken many forms, as I said. Village storytellers recounting news at community gatherings, protest songs highlighting social injustice, or locally produced newsletters discussing regional issues. These practices serve not only to inform but to mobilize public opinion, preserve collective memory and gives voice to the voiceless. In India, for example, rural women's collective and tribal communities have used folk journalism to document social issues like land rights, domestic violence and corruption, often blending storytelling, performance and local dialects to reach the broader audience. Many communities in countries such as Arabia, Egypt have a custom of presenting the previous year's report in a way on the occasion of annual festivals. This is also, you can say, a means of folk journalism. Now, I come to the very important term called fake lore. As you have seen, I have attached a photo, right, of the book Folklore and Fake Lore. So, what are these two? The word fake lore was first coined by Richard M. Dawson, and it means, distorted folk culture or fake folk culture. When a new folk culture is created by copying or distorting folk culture for a specific purpose, it is called fake lore. Dawson's main target was the stories written by Paul Bunyan, which he created himself without directly taking them from the folk culture. It is true that this cannot be called folklore, but they cannot be called fake lore either, because they are the own creations of the individual. In that sense, they can be non-folklore. But why can they be fake lore? No culture can be distorted, it can only be expanded. The theory of folklorismus originated right here. The next generation of Dawson therefore dismissed the word fake lore and the theory or concept of folklorism too, although its context was completely different. But what is to be said is that these theories or concepts declare that culture or folk culture is never destroyed or distorted. It is only expanded and transformed. Now we come to the end of the fourth lecture of the 12th module, and in this I have discussed another, you can say, a few very prominent things, okay, which can help you, as I said, in further reading and research. And these terms, folk journalism, fake lore, the implication of subaltern theory, is now very important in the study of folklore. Thank you and see you in my next lecture.